And welcome. Let's take a look at our top story this hour. The global race for a coronavirus vaccine could lead to this generation's Sputnik moment. The winning nation could get a jump start on protecting its citizens and restarting their economy. But the question is, who will win the race? Which nation will be the first with a miraculous escape? Clinical trials on humans have begun in China for a potential coronavirus vaccine developed by German pharmaceutical group BioNTech with Chinese company Fosun Pharma. 72 participants have already received their first dose following the approval for phase 1 trial from Chinese regulatory authorities. Germany has awarded 3 biotech companies grants to help them speed up the development of coronavirus vaccine candidates. However, it is highly unlikely to be widely available before the middle of next year. 4 potential vaccines are being developed in the United States. The race to produce a vaccine for COVID-19 has taken on political dimensions. More than 200 candidate vaccines are currently being developed, with roughly 24 at the stage of clinical trials with human volunteers. Laboratories around the world are racing to find a vaccine to curb COVID-19, which has claimed more than 700,000 lives and upended the livelihoods of millions. Chelsea Delaney, our DW correspondent, is joining us live from Berlin for more on this. Good afternoon to you. Now, there are many conflicting messages about the timeline for a vaccine. We have President Trump, for example, who has said on Thursday that a vaccine could be ready by November, while many public health experts have warned not to expect a vaccine until next year. When do you think that we could reasonably expect a vaccine to be available?
In the absolute best case scenario, it does appear that some companies will be able to get a vaccine approved this year. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of companies, especially some of the big pharmaceutical heavyweights like Pfizer, AstraZeneca, they have moved on to late stage trials. So they're testing these drugs on humans. They have seen pretty strong and positive results so far. So there are a lot of companies getting close, but it is very complicated to produce a vaccine. It usually takes several years to get through the regulatory approvals. Obviously, now there is just so much pressure and so much competition to produce the first vaccine because life and public health and the economy all really depends on that. But even if some of these companies do get the approval this year, public health experts do say it's going to take a while. There are a lot of caveats here because it's going to take a long time to ramp up production. Even once the approval comes, the first doses are going to be going to the most vulnerable population. So it could be several months, it could be years before a vaccine is widely available to the general population.
Right, Chelsea, on that, the director of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros, this week said that and stressed that a vaccine must be made available globally, or else the efficacy of such vaccines may suffer, so will the economies. Now, we've already seen vaccine nationalism, if you will, on the rise. Can the WHO actually ensure that this vaccine is shared globally?
There's definitely a lot of lip service being paid to this question now. A lot of global leaders are saying if we do find a vaccine, we need to make sure that it is widely available and that it isn't being excuse me, withheld from countries that don't have the same financial resources as the United States or Germany to pay for a vaccine. But the question of how you make that happen is quite complicated. So the WHO has tried to encourage pharmaceutical companies to basically share the research they're doing, to share the science and technology behind these vaccines they're developing. The pharmaceutical companies have been quite hesitant to do that because they say this is our intellectual property. We need to make money off this. We've invested billions from it. So we haven't really seen much of an agreement on this at this point. And from a legal standpoint, from the company's standpoint, it is quite difficult to imagine there being a wide-scale agreement on how to make sure that all of the most vulnerable countries will have access to this vaccine.
Right. And once vaccine is discovered, is this expected then to be a silver bullet? Will the global economy also return to its previous self, or are there potential long-term consequences? What could some of these be?
Sure. It's certainly not a silver bullet. And we've heard many public health officials, many politicians saying this recently, where, if we do get a vaccine soon, everything is not going to return to normal instantly. Whether everyone will have access to it and how quickly the vaccine can be made widely available, that's going to really determine how quickly economies recover, of course. But there already has been a lot of permanent damage done to the global economy. Many industries are under enormous pressure. If you look at perhaps the aviation industry or the travel industry as a whole, they've already made really permanent cuts to their workforces. Many have closed. So even if we do see this, there will be permanent changes to the global economy.
Right, and we did discuss it briefly earlier, but focusing specifically on Germany, what is Germany going to do about a vaccine, and how far has their research progressed?
So Germany has positioned itself at the forefront of this, and we've heard this from politicians here as well, where they really consider the development of a vaccine to be a national security risk at this point. So they say if we're dependent on other countries because of this idea of vaccine nationalism, that could really put us at a disadvantage. So they have invested a lot of money into development here. There's a pool of about 750 million euros that they've been handing out to accelerate development of these drugs. And there are several big contenders. One you mentioned earlier, the vaccine candidate from BioNTech, and then also CureVac is another leading candidate that's working with some other large pharmaceutical makers like GSK. So they are at this point testing these vaccines in humans. They're doing many tests around the world. But from what we've heard from the companies themselves, they don't expect there to be a vaccine widely available until the middle of next year yet.
Chelsea, thank you very much for that report, bringing us all the latest.